Hi everybody, I'm Rook. Welcome back to the table. Welcome to another top 5 list. It's top 5 week here, and I'm giving you a new top 5 video every day this week. Today we are looking at the top 5 Speed Duel cards that people abandoned. 5 great cards that you saw used pretty frequently and then people tossed to the side as newer, bigger, and better cards were released. I don't think there's really too many hot takes on this one, so this one might be a little safer. But of course, if you guys have your own opinions of what I'm about to list, please comment below. And of course, you can tweet me at Rook's Table. I'd love to have a nice, friendly chat with you. So without further ado, the top 5 Speed Duel cards people abandoned. Coming in at number 5, we have Vampire Lord. I chose Vampire Lord as number 5 because it's a card with a really great effect that you saw people play a lot last year. Came out in the Scars of Battle box, which was like August of 2019, and I actually saw people play this a lot because it was a fun new zombie card. The thing is, zombies just stopped being good. You look at 2020 and no one is playing zombies. The best zombie deck out there is King of the Skull Servants when they got that skill support, but still that's a very niche deck and you don't really see some sort of general ectoplasmic fortification or zombie mastery deck played. I had an ectoplasmic fortification deck for a while and I even built Viral Despair, which is using the skill Viral Infection, and I actually would tech Vampire Lord in that deck because it's a great zombie. I mean, it's got a great effect where if it's destroyed by a card effect, it's essentially coming back next turn on your standby phase. There's a lot of destruction by card effect in this game now. It's not necessarily about beating over something. Now, it is a 5-star monster that you have to tribute for, which kind of slows it down a little bit, but really, really fun, good zombie card you can splash into your zombie deck. But I really think that zombies kind of went away as nastier decks appeared throughout the end of last year and into this year. So Vampire Lord coming in at number 5. Number 4 is a trap card. This is Adhesion Trap Hole, one of the trap holes. We do not have Trap Hole. We do not have Bottomless Trap Hole, but we did have Adhesion Trap Hole. I believe the first Trap Hole to come out in the Speed Duel format. This came out with the Weevil and Rex decks last year. Adhesion Trap Hole was pretty simple. It was when your opponent summoned a monster, you half that monster's original attack. And this was actually a sneaky trap that people could tech in a lot of decks because you tribute it to get your big boss monster out or you bring it out in some other means. All of a sudden you flip an Adhesion Trap Hole and that kind of catches people off guard. The popular traps that people were running at the time of this card were things like Kunai with Chain, Windstorm, and Pataqua. So they're ready to activate traps on attack declaration, but Adhesion Trap Hole was one of the few traps where it was being activated upon a summon. So if a Dragon Caller is getting their Blue Eyes White Dragon out, you Adhesion Trap Hole that, it drops Blue Eyes to 1500 attack. All of a sudden they wasted a lot of resources to get a monster out that all is now essentially worthless because it was in a time when there was so much, is my attack higher than yours? Yes, okay, I'm going to win. I think one of the things that caused Adhesion Trap Hole to go away is that now we're moving more towards monsters that have insane effects where it's not necessarily about how much attack you have. A great card just off the top of my head is Command Knight. Command Knight is a staple in Twisted Personality Warrior, Inner Conflict Warrior, where they are buffing other warriors, and it has a secondary effect where you can't target that specific card for attacks. So if Command Knight was to get Adhesion Trap Hold, not really the end of the world, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to buff our Gear Freed, we're trying to buff our Blade Knight, and you can't attack it anyway. So I think that as we saw more cards that introduced more removal effects, and it wasn't so much about just strictly having more attack than your opponent's monster, Adhesion Trap Hole started to go away. Additionally, in the Trials of the Kingdom box, we got Floodgate Trap Hole, the second Trap Hole in the Speed Duel series, and this is the card where when a monster is summoned, you can activate Floodgate Trap Hole and it flips it into its set position face down defense mode. It cannot be flipped up. It doesn't necessarily take it off the field like Trap Hole or Bottomless would do, but it flips it into its set. So that's a very different trap hole that is not only looking to get rid of any attack threat, but it's also getting rid of the effect that the monster may have. So Adhesion Trap Hole, number 4. All right, number 3 is Blue Dragon Summoner. This is an effect monster that we saw in pretty much every Dragon Caller deck at the start of the format in 2019. This card was essentially your way to get dragons into your hand so that you could use Dragon Caller, Lord of Deflute, a Summoning Dragon, to get your dragons out. You need an effective way to be able to search for them. So Blue Dragon Summoner was if this card sent from field to graveyard, you add a dragon, warrior, or spellcaster normal monster from your deck to your hand. Emphasis on normal. We really weren't trying to search for any normal warrior or spellcaster. This was really just to get Blue Eyes, Red Eyes, etc. The normal dragons that you need for the Dragon Caller deck. There was one card that made this card obsolete, and that's Summoner's Art. Everyone is using the spell Summoner's Art now. It's a very quick search to get your dragon. You don't have to try and set Blue Dragon Summoner and have it get destroyed in order to get your dragon. You can just Summoner's Art. So Blue Dragon Summoner was a card you saw in all the Dragon Caller decks at the beginning. Now it is gone. All right, number 2, and this one you guys probably saw coming. It's hilarious how this card dropped off the face of the earth. We are talking about the Serpent Knight Dragon at number 2. This deck was the best deck in the Ultimate Predator's kind of Scars of Battle era. There were some times where it seemed unstoppable and just borderline unfair. The deck had a number of ways to get the resources into your hand to get Serpent Knight Dragon out on the field, and that's all you needed, because once Serpent Knight Dragon was out on the field, there was a skill to go with it called Nightmare Sonic Blast that came out in the Ultimate Predator starter deck. Nightmare Sonic Blast said something along the lines of, you reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. If at least 2 of them are monsters, you can pop something your opponent has. If like one of them is a monster, you can add a card to your hand. If all 3 are monsters, you can do both. Something similar to that. And how players would build this deck is that they would just straight up have so many monsters in the deck, except for cards like Summoner's Art and Tribute Doll that they used to get Serpent Knight Dragon out. The deck was loaded with monsters, so they would always achieve that effect from Nightmare Sonic Blast. Another big card that this deck would run is Gentlemander, which is a monster, but also a great hand trap to try and block your opponent while you get the setup of Serpent Knight Dragon. Once you had Serpent Knight Dragon out, it was very hard. It was very hard to come back from that, unless you were like me at the time you were playing Dinosaurs, Hyper Hammerhead, Gale Lizard, Return to Hand. Return to Hand was the bane of this deck because they spent all these resources to get Serpent Knight out. If you just put it back into the hand, then they got nothing they can do about it. Anyway, this deck was completely wiped out in December of last year when Trials of the Kingdom came out. Just an explosion of cards that can just straight remove and deal with this menace. The biggest one that was a threat was the Parasite Paranoid, and we're going into the Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth and the Cocoon of Ultra Evolution decks. You just equip that Serpent Knight Dragon with a Parasite and it's off the field, and they're just set to such a card disadvantage that there is usually very few things that they can do to come back. I really didn't even see this deck attempted in the tournaments I played following the release of the Trials of the Kingdom box. The deck was just made completely obsolete. It was too slow. You spent all your resources to get a monster out, but unlike some of the fusion monsters we have in the format, this card was absolutely devastating because of the way that you could continue to have a card advantage over your opponent by popping one of your opponent's cards each turn with the skill. The game introduced quick effect ways to deal with this monster once and for all. That deck was obliterated. So Serpent Knight Dragon, number 2 card that people just abandoned. All right, a number 1 Speed Duel card that people played and then just got rid of, tossed aside like an old piece of trash. The Time Wizard. Time Wizard, it just symbolized the joy and the innocence of Speed Duel as it was when it came out last year. Time Wizard was a card that you just see splashed in any old deck just because it's like, oh my gosh, they have Time Wizard in this deck. Yeah, I'm going to play this in my deck. Whatever, I flip a coin and maybe I'm destroying all your monsters. That sounds fun. Yeah. Slowly and slowly, as the meta was being formed and people stopped having as much fun, Time Wizard was gently eased out of a lot of decks that we saw. There was one particular deck around in the middle of 2019 where Time Wizard was a staple in, and that was when we saw the Joey skill It's My Lucky Day, where you can essentially pay 1,000 life points to rig a dice roll or a coin flip. So if you had It's My Lucky Day as the Joey skill, if you had the Time Wizard, you were always going to destroy all the monsters your opponent controls. Time Wizard and It's My Lucky Day together was a board wipe tactic that worked. Another card that worked really well with It's My Lucky Day was Dice Foon, which is the one where you roll a 6-sided die and you have magic removal based on what you roll. If you roll a 5, I think you can pop like 2 cards, which is really good. So these couple cards paired with that skill was really fun kind of in the middle of last year. It was played typically alongside Gravekeepers or potentially Warriors. But a really fun element added to the game was more and more stable board wipes appeared, and using the skill became so critical. We saw It's My Lucky Day kind of go away, and then unfortunately we saw the Time Wizard go away. So Time Wizard is the number 1 Speed Duel card I think people abandoned. I think you guys can splash this in any deck. I mean, of course, it's Time Wizard. You can splash this in any regular Yu-Gi-Oh deck, right? Just put him in there. Unfortunately, another thing in the Speed Duel format is that, Time Wizard is a liability with 500 attack, and you only have 3 monster slots, so that's another thing. Not only is it a total chance call on a board wipe, but it's also a liability on the field, which is just tough. There's too many other things that do board wipes better. Quickly replaced by Hidden Parasite Eradicating Aerosol. That was a very popular one that we saw after the Weevil and Rex decks came out. Poor Time Wizard. Anyway, guys, that was the top 5 Speed Duel cards people abandoned throughout the format. Are there any cards in this list that you are still hanging on to for dear life that you want to keep using, like the Time Wizard? Let me know. Now, these are my top 5. There were plenty of other cards where people ditched along the way. Any particular ones that come to mind and stick out for you, let me know in the comments below. Thanks, everybody. I'll catch you later.